do we want a leadership that wants to be a big fish in a small pond? Or do we want a leadership that can actually take on the Donald Trumps and the Xi Jinpings and the Anwar Ibrahims? The key question of this election is what kind of leadership do we want?
If one were the PAP, the rational thing to do actually is to slowly have actually more SMCs. So if you lose in any constituency, you only lose 1 seat or you lose 2 seats, but you don't lose all 5.
We'll first pass the polls, which actually give them a lot of leverage. With 61% of the votes, they can have over 80% of the seats. When your popular votes actually drops below 60, that is where the leverage works reverse against you.
I have pushed this argument. Look here, we have the money for free education, free healthcare, free school meals. I know that sounds radical to many Singaporeans who are not used to this notion of having anything free, but I assure you the money is there before our eyes.
We need to build resilience in our political parties. And one way to build resilience in times of uncertainty is to have a plethora of voices, actually.
I read the manifesto before I came, and all the direction are focused in the same thing, helping the less fortunate, the disabled, a better society. And that is the right track. Now, I want to share you an alternative way. Ask not what a country can do for you and what you can do for a country.
You know, you can talk till the cows come home about diversity, you can have slogans, you can have all those things, but if you don't have basic respect for another person who happens to have a different point of view, it's a lost case. Ladies and gentlemen, my dear panelists, thank you very much for making time to be here. This is the finale of the IQ coverage of GE, which stands for General Election, in case you're wondering, 2025. Give ourselves a big hand, guys. And now, can we give a big hand to the politicians who have made time to be here today? Just in case you're wondering, I wrote to the People's Action Party, the PAPHQ, and I'm still waiting for a reply. So I believe they're not coming. Pritam Singh was kind enough to reply and apologize for not being able to make it today. Workers' Party, that is. Leong Man Wai, from the Secretary General of the PSP, Progress Singapore Party, also conveys his apologies. He would have liked to be here, but he's pulled away last minute as well. So my big thanks, especially because of that, to the representatives from the SDP, PPP, RDU, and PAR. I'll be telling you all what these abbreviations mean in a short while. So what's the aim today? The aim is to give the political parties represented here an opportunity to say what they want to their constituents as well as to the people of Singapore, which they have not had the chance to say before this. And this is going to be going out tomorrow. We're going to be posting it tomorrow. It's not live. And tomorrow is the eve of cooling off day. So it's a good time for everyone to reflect on it. So let's say things that gives people an opportunity, the incentive to reflect on. We also have on the panel Assistant Professor Elvin Ong from the Political Science Department of NUS. Give him a hand, please. Some general information. As you would be aware, a total of 97 seats, right? 33 constituencies. As we know, Marine Parade, Bradle Heights, GRC has had a walkover, right? Otherwise, all other constituencies are being contested, right? Some even four-way contests. This recording is for 1.5 hours, right? So I hope that we would all keep what we want to say as short and sharp as possible. But please don't also feel that you need to be unduly constrained because of time. I'd like to start by asking my panelists, the political panelists here, to address this question one after the other when I introduce you. The question is, what is the burning issue for your party that you feel needs further elaboration, that may not have had the chance to be adequately addressed so far? And you'll be given no more than 3 minutes, right? And I will stop you using whatever means I have. And there are some heavy stuff here which I could throw. Let's also try and be civilized. Let's be factually accurate. Otherwise, we could get POFMAT, but we could get POFMAT even otherwise. That statement alone could be POFMAT. Okay. You guys are not taking POFMAT seriously. This is wrong, Okay. Of course, avoid anything that's libelous, right? We should also try our best to be respectful even as we are critical, even as we criticize, whether in English or Hokkien. Now, before we go on to our panelists, some background information about the parties that are not represented here. Number one, the PAP, as I said, they're contesting all seats except for Marine Parade Braddell Heights GRC. The Workers' Party contesting 8 constituencies, 26 seats. Progress Singapore Party, 6 constituencies, 13 seats. Right? Okay, let's now go to our first panelist. Professor Paul Tambyah, chairman of the Singapore Democratic Party, or affectionately known as the SDP, which was founded in 1980. 4 constituencies, 11 candidates. Your time starts now.
Thank you. I've got the timer up here. And I sense why Viswa is a bit nervous about letting me go first. Because the first and only time that the mainstream state-owned Singapore media ever got POFMAT was during the last general election, when I made a statement about the migrant worker dormitories, which actually came from the Straits Times. But poor Viswa was there at NUSS, and he was hosting a discussion, and I said it, and then he got POFMAT, and I didn't, because we never published it. That's why he said POFMAT is just so incredibly complicated that it takes someone with a Cambridge Law degree to understand. So anyway, in regards to your question, what do I really wish that my voters or our voters would know in the next 48 hours or so? And I think the number one thing is that you can vote without fear. So that, I think, has been a huge issue, and I don't think we've done a really good job communicating about it. We try doing it. We try and keep telling them the vote is secret. The Straits Times had an infographic today about telling people the vote was secret, but it begins with the serial number, why we need to have the serial number, so that we can trace back if there's any issue and dispute. Once you say something like that, people just get really puzzled. But the reality is there's no way they can do that. And they have never done that, to my knowledge, in the last 70 years. We constantly get this refrain, I'd like to vote for the opposition, but, my son is in the police and he wants to become a commander or a deputy commander or a division chief or something like that, and I'm afraid that'll affect him. That's ridiculous. Number one, they don't even know he's your son. Number two, who's gonna be able to track it down? They say, no, they know everything. And the trouble is all Google's fault, right? Because you go and search for holidays in China, then next thing you know, all these things start popping up about tourist things. And for somebody who's of that generation, it's pretty scary. If Google knows this, the Singapore government definitely knows it too. So I think this is something that we have to try and communicate. We've been trying to address it through the rallies, through the speeches. I got my good friend Prema Madhi to try and reactivate an old video that she did actually in 2011, where they got some celebrities to go around telling people, my vote is secret, your vote is secret. I told people on stage that I was there when they burned the ballot boxes. We followed them. I think you were there too. Yes. Right? We followed them from the Supreme Court vault all the way to the incinerator in Tuas, and we saw it go up in smoke. So I think that's something that we really need to communicate. We may not have done a great job about it. I'm hoping we can do that in the next 48 hours or so. Thanks.
Is that it?
Yeah, 3 minutes. I'm following the time.
I like this guy. Okay. Second, we go to the Red Dot United Party, RDU. The chairman is here, Dr. David Foo, and RDU was formed in the last election, 2020, right? 4 constituencies, 15 candidates.
Yes.
Your time starts now.
Well, thank you, Viswa. I think today Singapore has become a very high-cost society. To bear these high costs, we need high wages and high productivity. I think we all agree on that. And with high cost of labor, small SMEs are finding it difficult to recruit and retain talent. More importantly, families are feeling the pinch. Our citizens, we face higher housing prices, soaring healthcare costs, but stagnant wages. Seniors are skipping treatments. Many parents are worried about their children's futures. Work retraining again and again and again with no clear path to a secure or good paying job. We believe in growth with equity. Our manifesto is not filled with slogans. Our manifesto is a serious proposal to build a new social contract, to restore dignity to our seniors, protection for our workers, and fairness for every Singaporean. We want to create a more inclusive and sustainable growth model towards a more balanced economy. Focusing on how much GDP growth doesn't necessarily tell us how good it is or for whom. That means growing for the people and not just for numbers. That means supporting SMEs, valuing all work, and ensuring that productivity gains will lead to higher wages and not just higher profits. So the real question we want is just not how much we grow, but who gets to benefit from that growth. That's why our manifesto is built on HEART, H-E-A-R-T, housing security through SIRS and rent-to-own schemes, equitable healthcare, capping out-of-pocket costs, expanding MediShield Life, a resilient economy, one that plans long-term and puts Singaporeans at the center, a transparent governance with Freedom of Information Act to rebuild trust. Our promise is to build a Singapore that doesn't run only efficiently, but also humanely. A Singapore where we, our parents, your children, your children's children, are treated not as digits on a data sheet, but as first-class citizens in your own country. Because this is the only home that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next, we have Meng Seng, one of the most seasoned politicians in Singapore. Now, he's Secretary General of the People's Power Party, or PPP, which was founded in 2015, right? 2 constituencies, 10 candidates.
Well, thank you for having me, Viswa. Okay, our manifesto is basically very simple. I believe politics is about policies. It's not about politicking, right? So our slogan is "Make Singapore Home Again." So what does it mean? We have to take care of the old, the middle age, the young, and the children, right? But having that, policies is about life, livelihood, and good governance. These are the 3 key points. A lot of people have been talking about livelihood. A lot of people are talking about governance. But for my party, why we actually have 10 candidates for a small party like us is because our priority is actually life. Because without life, livelihood doesn't matter. Right? So our key message that didn't get out in the mainstream media is actually the mandatory vaccination order, which was amended in 2023. A lot of people do not know about that. Right? When we go to ground, a lot of people do not know that. For the next pandemic to come, if the Director General of Medicine, Health, right, decided that we need to put a vaccine, whether it's tested, fully tested or not, when you have this law, everyone has to take it, regardless of your own body condition. That's number 1. Number 2, if you do not want to take it, you will be fined for first-timer up to $10,000 or jailed for 6 months, up to 6 months. The second offense will be double, right? And the best part is, in the amendment, indemnity will be given to the officers that carry out all these orders. That means if anything happened to you, whether you die from a vaccination or have any vax injury, right, you cannot sue them. These are actually made into law, which we in the People's Power Party felt that is against human rights. The body belongs to you, not to the state. So this is something very fundamental to us. But the mainstream media have been sidelining these messages. When we talk about the livelihood issues, right, cost of living and Medishield and all that, they will report. But when it comes to this, it is actually missing in the contest campaign narrative. And this is what we hope that this will carry out very effectively for people to decide why we want to support this. No, we do not want. Right? That's our key message.
Thank you. Next, we have Lim Tean, Secretary General of the People's Alliance for Reform, or PAR. Now, PAR constitutes three parties. Number one, People's Voice Party. That's your party.
That's my party.
Right?
That's
and
right.
then Reform Party and Democratic Progressive Party. And the PAR was formed in 2023. And this election, you are fielding 6 constituencies. You're contesting in 6 constituencies and fielding 13 candidates, 13 seats, right?
That's right.
The time starts now.
Thank you. So, well, let me just give you a gist of what are the proposals for PAR in this election. We are pushing very hard our proposal for free education, free healthcare, free school meals for every Singaporean child. Because, having talked to a lot of young families, particularly in Potong Pasir where I'm contesting, and in this area known as Bidadari and Alkaf, where you go there, it's amazing. Every family is young, toddler children of 2-3 years old, some newborns. And they tell us that, one of the big difficulties in having children is because of the cost of living. And childcare is very, very expensive. So, and I have pushed this argument, look here, we have the money for free education, free healthcare, free school meals. I know that sounds radical to many Singaporeans who are not used to this notion of having anything free, but I assure you the money is there before our eyes. Where does the money come from? If you take the CPF annualized returns, what the government pays you, your 4% or 2.5%, the difference between that and the 6% that they earn, you have 13.4 billion there, all right? Every year they transfer about 24 billion into what they call special transfers into endowments and trusts for future expenses. No government in the world does accounting that way, all right? If you take that, you have crossed the line. We only need another 20 billion to have free education and free healthcare on top of what the government is already paying. So for me, that is the most important proposal PAR is putting forward in this election. Plus, we have our own proposals for lowering the cost of public housing, in which we want first to stop PRs from buying public housing because we think that is what is causing the surge in resale prices, which then pulls along the BTO price. And secondly, as for the BTO, we differ from PSP, who wants land costs taken out totally. We think that that's going to crash the market. We would rather gradually reduce land costs, maybe save 5% every 6 months, and we will bring it down eventually. So those are the 2 big proposals we have for reducing the cost of living.
Professor from NUS Political Science Department, Elvin.
Yeah, thank you, Viswa, for the invitation to join this panel. So I will put on my academics hat for this panel, and I will share some numbers and share some observations about what I think the elections have evolved so far from the elections I've observed from the past, right? So number one, a couple of numbers. So 97 seats up for grabs. In order to form a government with a simple majority, you need 49 seats. In order to have a government with a 2/3 supermajority, you need 65 seats. Now let's assume that the PAP is going to be the dominant incumbent and It is trying to go and achieve that minimum of 65 seats to achieve supermajority. Now, to deny the PAP a supermajority of 65 seats, that means that opposition parties need 33 seats in total. So the magic number is 33, right? No opposition party on their own is going to get to that 33 magic number because the largest opposition party, Workers' Party, is only contesting in 26 seats. Yeah. So even if Workers' Party wins all their seats, they're not going to be able to deny the PAP government the two-thirds supermajority, which means if they want to deny if the opposition needs to deny the PAP the two-thirds majority, the Workers' Party needs to work with some of the opposition parties here, right? That's the first thing to note. A couple of things that I've seen evolved from these elections as compared to the past. I think number one, these elections have seen much more debate and engagement in terms of policies, public policies. For example, in terms of GST increase, whether it should be increased, it should be delayed, it should be reduced, it should be waived for essential items, so on and so forth. I think there has been much more ideological positioning and a debate about public policy issues as compared to the past. I remember in the past, the manifestos for opposition parties were 6-page PowerPoint slides, 4-page A4 papers. I was very surprised to see the Singapore People's Party actually were able to print out their manifesto and send it to my mailbox. And I thought that they didn't have the resources to do that, but they did, right? And so I think it is a good sign that we're evolving more towards an ideological debate about public policies. Number two, that I can think of in terms of how the election campaign has evolved is that one topic has come up, which is the importance or non-importance of a PAP potentially losing a cabinet minister if it loses a GRC. Now, of course, the PAP will claim that it is very problematic for the PAP if it loses a GRC and if it loses a cabinet minister because it will severely weaken the ruling party. And there are many Singaporeans who actually believe in that particular argument, right? And so I think if opposition parties want to win more seats, want to win more GRCs, they have to give some assurance to voters that they do not necessarily want to potentially rock the boat too much and not severely weaken the government too much, even if they manage to defeat a few incumbent cabinet ministers. And finally, I would say something that has evolved over the past few elections is that there is a lot of media saturation out there. There's so many platforms, so many podcasts, so many YouTube videos that you can watch, right? And I think there's a feeling of confusion among voters. How do I vote for? Am I pulled between voting for local issues, the playgrounds, and the rubbish clearing versus national issues? There's a tension between should I reward or punish the incumbent in my constituency, or should I look forward to the future to vote for a futuristic, better team? So I think voters are generally confused, and I would urge everyone to take cooling off day to basically just write down on a piece of paper. What do you care about? Who is contesting in the constituency? And how do you think you will vote? You will find how much writing down on a piece of paper actually helps clarify your mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Elvin. It's very interesting, the point you made about perception of opposition, right? I grew up as a kid in the 1960s. Huh? I don't look my age. And I tell you, some of you here would know what I'm talking about. The famous Fullerton Square rally, which then was at the Fullerton Square, which is not anymore, right? The Fullerton Square rally is usually on the eve of polling day, right? There was no cooling off day then. And the famous Harbans Singh, famous Harbans Singh as an opposition candidate would go out there. And I tell you, it blew my mind, the kind of thing. I was a little boy standing there fascinated and wondering, is this really politics? Even I, as a kid, knew that he was talking nonsense, right? Because he would say, do you all know that Rajaratnam is a mee goreng seller? Some of you may remember it. And then people say, yeah, and then go and vote for the PAP, And then there was all this talk that came up, many of us know, right, that the caricature of the opposition, bicycle thief.
Yes.
And I think it was LKY who described opposition as they're no better, they're all essentially bicycle thieves and so on. I don't know what else you all stole, but do these guys look like bicycle thieves to you all? I mean, if they are, they're hiding it really well, So number one, to add on to what Elvin's observation is, we've come a long way. We have come a long way. Even today, even though the opposition parties are not as well resourced as they perhaps can be or should be, with whatever resources they have, they're coming out here and doing this. And it takes a lot of organizational skills, abilities, as well as hard work on the ground, So we've come a long way. Having said that, I think the PAP also has come a long way, And Elvin was highlighting it just now when we were having a chat, and I agree. And this is something I was reflecting. At least so far, the PAP has not been browbeating as much as in some other previous years. No, I think the PAP has also come to realize that the rules of engagement has to change. They have to change, So I think this has so far been a reasonably reasonable election so far, right? Of course, things can change in one day. The only area where there's been some exchange, and let's face it, in politics, you will have some mudslinging. Otherwise, it's not entertaining for us as well. Okay? I mean, so let's also have a threshold, But you must be able to take it as well as you give. I think that should be the sportsmanship that we expect. Give. If you want to give it, hammer the opposition, fine. But let the opposition hammer you once in a while or cho-cho you, So I think we should move towards that sort of parity of conduct, right? Now, to pick up from what Elvin said just now, this whole issue of what if a cabinet minister or up to 3 cabinet ministers lose their seats, right? Now, this is what the PAP has said. I think it was Prime Minister Lawrence Wong who highlighted that. What if 3 of them lose? Lee Hsien Loong said that. No, Lee Hsien Loong came in after that. And then SM Lee said a couple of days ago in response to Pritam Singh's statement, SM Lee said, it's ridiculous, he used the word ridiculous, it's a ridiculous argument to say that the PAP can lose ministers without weakening the government. Now, Pritam Singh questioned why the PAP needed a 2/3 majority in parliament in order to govern properly. Personally, if you ask me, it's not an unfair question. His question is, why does the ruling party need a 2/3 majority to be able to function effectively as government? That's number one. He argued that the government could have, and I quote, enough leeway, enough focus, even if all 26 Workers' Party candidates were voted into parliament. You may not get the 2/3 majority, the 1/3 majority to prevent the PAP from getting a 2/3 majority. But does that mean that you'll be... So this question is, in my view, probably the most important question that has surfaced. We have talked at length about cost of living and so on, but I'd like to hear from the panel. What's your response to both what Pritam Singh, as leader of the opposition, said, as well as what the PAP leadership have said? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I started out the last time. So I've actually addressed this in a couple of rallies. And the first way I addressed it turned out to be really popular. And that's when I was reminded that football is the most popular sport in Singapore. Because I made the analogy and I said that, if you are running a football team, you want to play against teams that are stronger than you in order to get better. Otherwise, you end up a mediocre team, and you don't want to change the goalposts. You don't want to shorten the training time for your opponents to 28 days. You don't want to commit professional fouls, and that resonated. So people started asking me which football team I support, and I don't tell them. I don't want to alienate them. But the other illustration which I used yesterday was when I did my, after I graduated, my father encouraged me to do my postgraduate training overseas. And the reason was he was a very well-known physician. So every time I went around somewhere, they'd say, "Oh, Tambyah, you're John Tambyah's son." And so I had to live up to that expectation, but I also had doors open to me that I wouldn't otherwise have. And that's a long story, too long for this discussion. So he said, you go to America where nobody knows who you are, and then you prove yourself. Then you see you're competing against the best in the world. You're not a big fish in a small pond. So the question is, do we want a leadership that wants to be a big fish in a small pond? Or do we want a leadership that can actually take on the Donald Trumps and the Xi Jinpings and the Anwar Ibrahims, of the world? So I think that is kind of the, as you said, the key question of this election is what kind of leadership do we want?
Thank you.
I think my take on it would be that, we haven't quite addressed it yet, but my take on it would be that if you're a leader of a major political party and you say that, which means to say you're a very fragile party. So what Lee Kuan Yew did say, right? You can't put Humpty Dumpty together. So if you look at the PAP as a Humpty Dumpty, you can't put them together. If they break, it's a very fragile party. There is no resilience. We need to build resilience in our political parties. And one way to build resilience in times of uncertainty is to have a plethora of voices, actually. So if with 51 seats out of 97, you still have a majority. But if you cannot form a cabinet, then I worry for the future of Singapore, actually. I really worry for that, right? So along the way, I took a taxi because it's raining. There was another taxi cab that stopped next to this driver. So I told the taxi driver, "Do you have a bottle of kerosene?" I say, "Why? I need to burn the taxi next to it." I say, "Why?" "Because if there's competition, our leaders say cannot work. Can you? You've got more than 1,000 taxis around, right?" So if you look at that argument taken to its logical conclusion, it doesn't make sense. Are we such a fragile country? Do we have a fragile political leadership? I hope not. I certainly hope not. Yeah? Because a plethora of voices only strengthens and sharpens the current political leadership. And they should actually take good advantage of that. So don't worry about it. Think through it. Yeah? Thank you.
Thank you. Meng Seng?
I would say, from a political system perspective, it is their own doing. They wanted a GRC system with first past the post, which actually give them a lot of leverage. And that's why, with 61% of the votes, they can have over 80% of the seats. That's the leverage. But when, statistically speaking, when your popular votes actually drops below 60, that is where the leverage works reverse against you. It means that basically each GRC you put actually your ministers to lead, right? So when you start to losing one GRC, you're not only losing your backbenchers, but you lose your ministers altogether. It's not just like show hand. When you play poker, you show hand. But nobody gamble like that. So the alternative to this, right, there are two ways of doing it, to change the GRC system to a proportional representation system. I mean, for the first 20% of votes that you get, your ministers will get elected. And whether how many of the backbenchers that you can keep, right, it depends on your popularity, right? Then we will have people like Paul Tambyah, David Foo to get elected because most probably they will have 20%. And the first leader of the team will get in. Then we have a win-win situation for Singapore.
Yeah.
That is actually the most ideal system for us, right?
Maybe I'll ask Elvin to respond to the idea of should we, because no system is perfect. right? I'm not saying, I mean, the proportionate representation system has its own flaws as well.
Before that, let me finish this. So the only way for this reform to happen is to make PAP feel the pain first. They must lose enough ministers, enough GRCs before they rethink whether this leverage really works for them or against them.
Okay. Elvin.
Yeah, this topic of electoral system change is also quite dear to my heart. I remember one of the first letters or commentaries I wrote to the Straits Times was about electoral system change, arguing for electoral system change in Singapore. So just to clarify a little bit of what Mr. Goh Meng Seng has mentioned, right? So if you think about the GRC as a system, currently it's supposedly advantages the PAP because if they win 51% of the votes, right, they win, say, 5 seats, 6 seats, 4 seats, right? But it could be a reverse effect for the opposition if the opposition wins 51% of their votes, and then they can win all 5 seats, right, and push a lot of the PAP members of parliament out of power. So if one were the PAP, the rational thing to do actually is to slowly have actually more SMCs and to reduce the GRCs, right? So if you lose in any constituency, you only lose 1 seat or you lose 2 seats, but you don't lose all 5, right? If that is something that is to be thought of. So more SMCs, less GRCs. However, number 2 way of potential reform is, as Mr. Goh Meng Seng said, to have some form of a proportional representation system. But of course, there's also flaws in proportional representation systems. So what a lot of countries have done around the world, such as New Zealand, such as Germany, such as Thailand, such as Japan, is to have a mixed system where you have both SMCs for first past the post, and you have a proportional representation system. So whenever people go to the ballot box, they actually have 2 votes. They vote for number 1, who they want to be in their constituency to represent them. And number 2, they vote for a national party, who they want to reward, right, at the national level. And so this actually delineates the responsibility quite clearly because you vote for someone maybe to emphasize local constituency issues, but you also vote for a party that can actually win more seats to take on national issues. So it ultimately gives voters 2 bites of the cherry, right? If you think about it.
So that's a bit of a hybrid system.
Yeah.
But historically, the first past the post system operates on the understanding that it's a single member constituency, right? So when you then introduce an aberration, such as the GRC, it is an aberration, it's not meant to be part of the first past the post, right? Then you have a problem, right? So in '88, when GRCs were introduced, it was highly disadvantageous to opposition parties, because you needed to form groups, you needed enough contestants to form,
And
right?
the cost.
And the cost. And so it was quite cumbersome when you introduced the GRC system in '88. Now, what is interesting and what I'd like to put to everyone here is we are seeing now, especially this year, this election compared to 2020, right? We are seeing a surge in the number of SMCs. The question is, are we now going back to what was originally the system?
Yes.
Right? Because maybe we've now come to realize that it's very dangerous because you can actually lose cabinet ministers, right? Therefore, are we seeing a trend back, the reversal to go back, and will there come a time in maybe 2 elections from now, will there come a time when we drop GRCs and go back to first past the post, which is all SMCs?
But would we then change the rationale for GRCs? The purpose of GRCs is to have minority representation. Remember that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you didn't
Remember
need
that?
that because when we had all SMCs, we had plenty of minority representation.
No, I know that. But this is not my narrative. This was the rationale for GRCs.
You're just being naughty.
And we didn't say that. It's not I that say that, right?
Yeah. So okay. What I don't want is for this to turn into a PAP bashing. Okay?
No, it's not.
But it doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be. Because we're talking about possibilities without necessarily pointing a finger at any particular party and so on. Okay? I think we can. And generally speaking, I'm averse to the idea of whacking someone who's not present.
No worries. But I need to also point out the rationale for GRCs, right, is to have minority representation.
Yeah,
that's
I
the
agree.
rationale. Whether we agree or not, whether we say it's true or not true, that's a different story. But that was the rationale put up, and that became law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to hear the audience. You think what? Free lunch, free dinner? Okay. No. Is there anyone in the audience? There's some Magat, ex-PAP MP. No, I mean I'm not putting in a spot. Although I may. No. He's the closest to the PAP kind of. No, me. No.
Hey, you're NMP, right?
Nominated MP.
Okay,
That's
I'm
the
going to
training
bash
ground
you
for
up.
PAP
Okay.
MPs.
Yes, Magat.
Yes, I do agree with the fact that the GRC was implemented primarily to ensure minority representation those days. But I think, I'm not close to the party anymore now, but nevertheless, I do think that because of the loss of several GRCs in recent elections, there is probably a rethink of probably that we have too many GRCs, and therefore the trend now more towards having more SMCs. But ultimately, it's going to depend on the outcome of this election itself, whether there's going to be any further change to the GRC system or not.
Right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Anybody wants to respond? Anyone else who wants to?
Well, for me, I hope
Yeah.
it will not revert back. That's number one. Why? Because if you have a proportional representation in the GRC, people can vote with their hearts of the core values. The parties that's most aligned to their own core values and their beliefs and their vision for Singapore, then we will have a more dynamic representation in Parliament in that sense. Right?
Well, the other argument that has been put up is in a GRC system, if you're part of a GRC, your relationship with the MP is quite tenuous, because there are so many. There are 5 MPs, 4 MPs. You don't have the one-on-one relationship that you actually typically have in an SMC. I mean, that's what I've heard from MPs.
Although the PAP tends to break them up into precincts.
Yeah,
So,
but it's not the
they
same.
and they are I mean it's not the same, but the counter argument is that then they can cross cover for each other.
This issue of wanting to have ethnic minority representation in one's parliament is not unique to Singapore, right? There are many other countries, such as New Zealand, such as Taiwan, that want to actually preserve minority representation in their parliament. So if I'm not wrong, New Zealand actually has some sort of system to have indigenous representation in their parliament, right? So I don't know actually what's the exact system, but I'm sure someone can do a Google and someone can do some research paper on it. So I welcome anyone who wants to provide some grants to run some research on what kind of systems help preserve ethnic minority representation around the world.
I'd like to. I think this is an important topic because we can talk about constituencies and so on, but let's go back to the fundamental principles, right? And a major turning point for me was the result of the last presidential election. The last time I checked, Tharman Shanmugaratnam, president, before he became president, Tharman Shanmugaratnam is a Ceylonese of general South Asian stock, right?
Yeah.
He got 72% of not Jurong GRC, 72% across Singapore.
Yes, that's correct.
And we ran
Why
against
are
him.
we still holding on to this view that people will vote along racial lines? I think that has put a big question mark on that, right? Regardless of whether we want, which system, it's the principle of it. When are we going to get away from this crutch of race? I think it's a question that all of us needs to ask ourselves. It's not an indictment against the PAP, because maybe it was like that several years back in 1988. Maybe it was like that when the GRC system was introduced. But this year, we are celebrating 60 years since independence 65. 66 years. 66 years since we had self-rule in 1959. We can't be using the crutch forever and still continue to recite the pledge that says regardless of race, language, or religion. Maybe it should be regardless of race, language, or religion. If you ask me, that may be more accurate, because I don't think we'll ever come to a point where it's regardless of race, language, or religion, because I've not come across any society. I don't think we need to work towards that, but it's really about let's consciously regard less of race, religion in all our decisions, major decisions such as this,
I think we might be there. A reason why I say we might be there is because there is this mindset shift, right? So it could be a generational mindset shift that's needed, but it's a mindset shift. And I think that if you look at our society, we have temples, mosques, churches on the same stretch of road. I used to tell my students, middle road's the best way to go, because there's along that road, every religious faith is well represented, right? So the question, I think it's a mindset shift. It could be a generational thing. And after 66 years, let's evaluate.
Yeah.
Let's rethink it.
Rethink it in a very fundamental way. And we're very fortunate to have Dr. William Wan here. He has been with the kindness movement for the longest time. And these issues are close to his heart. And I know you as a good friend. Can we give him the mic, please? This is how I volunteer people.
To me, one of the most telling things is for it to be said that we're not ready for an Indian Prime Minister. Then what's all this racial harmony about? I mean, I've been involved in racial harmony. My best friends are Indians and Sikhs and all sorts of races, and Muslims and Buddhists, and I'm a Christian, and we all eat together, we grew up together. And now we are told that we're not ready. I mean, what have we been doing? So I agree that we shouldn't be thinking about the race and religion divide in a way that is not always necessary. In fact, like you said, it should be regarding less rather than thinking so much about it. I remember growing up, and I'm probably one of the older ones here. I'm 78, by the way. I remember growing up with Indian friends and Muslim friends and Hindu friends and Sikh friends, and we never felt that we were anything other than friends. We were not easily offended. We kid each other. I remember one of my Malayali friends, we still remain friends, even though we've been together since primary school. This guy, my good friend, is like you, not very dark, Viswa. And when I was a young kid, I was very dark, and we were studying biology, I believe, and people ask, how come your Indian friend is fair and you are dark? And I say, it's osmosis. And we laugh at it. We laugh like we just did. And we were enjoying ourselves. But today, some of these things become very sensitive, Yes. You cannot talk, cannot say.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you very much, William. Yes, Jay, Mike, please.
Hi, everyone. I think, my name is Jay. I come from this group called the Independent Citizens. Okay, so I think the minority issue is not how you look, but what you represent, I think. It's the issues you stand for. If somebody speaks about a certain issue, then they probably kind of put you with that issue. And you can be a person of majority religion or race, And if you talk about the Palestinian issue, you're associated with that, for example. So that's one. Number two, if they want a minority representation, they could have done a system of 2 ministers standing at a GRC. Shrink the GRC down, and then you have the majority race and 1 minority. Or if they want to go further, you can have a Chinese, Malay, and Indian, and 3 ministers standing in 1 GRC, smaller GRC, if that's what they wanted to achieve. But this one, I'm going to get a Prof mark for it. Maybe to make things difficult for the opposition to have a team, back then, they made it 5. It's difficult to get 5. You can get a 3. So this is what I think. So right now, doesn't matter. When I went online, my followers are mostly Chinese. It's not, they don't see the color anymore. We are all colorblind, I think. So like what you said, after 60 years, if we are still debating about minority issues, I think something has gone wrong. And this has been put forth not by the citizens, by others.
Get it. Now, in the interest of time, let's move on from this topic. But what is important is I think there appears to be, looking at the nods I'm seeing, there is a call for maybe a review, not just of the GRC system, but some of the basic assumptions that we make in party politics, for example, right? Now, I'd like to go back to the issue of the ruling party losing cabinet position potentials, right? Now, there are obviously 2 categories. One would be those who are already serving as ministers or senior ministers of state, right? And the second category is fresh candidates who are likely to be parachuted in and start off as ministers of state, or in some cases even as a cabinet minister. We are seeing that trend, right? Which is not a bad thing. So what I'd like to ask is, this is the basis of a commentary that I just put out today, right? What is it that in a general election you're required to do? We all know that in the Westminster system, you don't choose who the ministers are. Unlike the US presidential system, where you're voting for the president and the vice president. Here, you're not. You're electing your member of parliament. Now, whether the member of parliament becomes a minister or not, that's the prerogative of the party, the ruling party, right? So if that's the assumption, you are actually voting for an MP. You're not voting for a political office holder. Why should there be so much of concern at this point in time? I've been trying to get my head around it. Because you're really voting not for a DPM, not for Prime Minister. You know what I mean? You're voting for a member of parliament. So what are the qualities we are looking for in this person that you're voting to be your member of parliament? What are these qualities? I'd like to hear from the audience as well as the panel. Who'd like to go first? Yes, Michael.
I don't think people go to the ballot box thinking whether they're going to lose a minister or what. They just want to vote for the best person they think to be the MP. Right? So even though you have a GRC, but people identify still with their specific precinct or constituency. For example, you ask the question, what if you lose 2 or 3 ministers? What if you lose Arjunate? You lose the leader of the opposition. Right? Nobody asks that question. But people will say, yeah, so what's the loss? Right? So the question really is not personal, right? But really a question of leadership. And here, in this case, leadership is really, would the Prime Minister be affected? Should he lose his position in the GRC? Right? So people will be asking, which leader am I working for? Not so much hey, this guy is a minister, so I better work for him. I don't think people are thinking that way. Right? So basically, at the root of it, we are talking about what? We're talking about changing the rules. Right? Everybody who lose a football game like to choose like to change the rules. But the rules have changed. The rules have changed. GRC, the alternative parties have adapted to a GRC and they've grown. Right? I think the quality of the alternative parties has grown because of GRC. Right? You look at your candidates this round, superb candidates. Right? So I think the issue.
So, Michael, in a nutshell, what's the point you're making?
My point is about leadership. When people go to the ballot box, right, they look at the parties. Frankly speaking, they don't know most of the party leaders, except maybe the Prime Minister. Right? But would say Marsiling UT say, oh, if I don't vote for PAP, I might lose the Prime Minister. I don't think they are thinking that way. Okay? They're still looking at the issues that many of you raise up. Increasing cost of living, HDB, flats, and so on. Right? People are not even talking about. So you say that we should vote more opposition MPs, and on day one, you let go 5 goals, and then after that you say, look, you got to vote all of us in. Then why do you give up 5 goals? Okay. So I think we need to focus. The specific ministers are not that important. There are many talents in the pipeline, just as there are many talents that you have in your own parties. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Dinesh, behind.
I think to answer your question, I think the first would be, how would the residents feel at their usual MPS, when they see, can this meet the people session? So would the particular MP be able to connect and listen to their concerns or voices? And, when they feel that they can listen and be able to relate to their voices, then I think when they go to the ballot box, I feel that, this person is likable, I can relate to them. And so that would help to allow them to make a decision on who to vote for in terms of their particular MP. So I guess it's also in terms of how many visits they have made. Have they been in the coffee shops, doing visits, house visits? So there are many factors as well when you look into the overall perspective of things.
So you're saying that how diligent they are. But what if it's a fresh face?
If it's a fresh face, I would say likability. So
what is likability?
Singing.
Yeah. No, it's a fair question. What is likability? Is it the same as populism? Okay, let me ask you that question. What's the difference between likability and populism?
I think populism is more in terms of attractiveness. I vote for you because I think this person is attractive. Likability is in terms of potentially, how do I put it? How relatable are you in my day-to-day life? So if for a young person, you look at a young MP to be, says, what, this MP is able to relate to my concerns, right? And I think he knows the kind of pain I am in, and therefore I would like to give him a chance.
So that likability centers around things like being authentic. Being authentic.
Correct.
Right?
That's right.
Which is very different from populism. Huh?
That's right.
And also demonstrating care by listening.
That's right.
Shutting up sometimes and listening.
That's right.
Things like qualities like that, right? Now, thank you.
Welcome.
Yuliana?
I think what I've observed, in this question of the fear of losing a cabinet minister, in the past, having an anchor minister in the GRC, people would probably vote for the GRC because they want to keep the minister in. But I've noticed maturity in voters in that they're actually assessing each candidate. So that could be the downfall of the GRC system, in the sense that an anchor minister will not be enough for the party to win votes immediately. So I'm noticing that trend in assessing each individual candidate, all 5 of them, all 4 of them. among younger voters especially. And I think that's why even the new face candidates are being put under scrutiny. And it does seem like singing competitions help, but it's not the end all and be all to win votes, especially among young voters.
Yeah, and actually there was a commentary from someone from PSP, I think yesterday or today, that actually the party has the final say as to whether you deploy a minister in a GRC or not, right? So it's your decision. You can choose not to deploy a minister in a GRC. If that minister, for example, is very, very important, then you don't want to subject the minister to such a risky situation, risky proposition, So there are various sides to this picture. We have 25 minutes left. So I'd like to put this to the panel as well as the audience. Right? This issue of free, right? It's politically expedient for us to say, we want to give this free and so on. This is the government's view. The government, and I don't think it's wrong. The government has a right to ask you, look, where are you going to get the money from? And it's a financial and fiduciary prudence of the government that has allowed us to amass the reserves that we today have, that has given us the latitude to do a lot of things during crisis situations such as COVID and so on, where other countries struggle. And we don't even think twice. We have the money. It's a question of whether we make the decision to take the money out and use it or not. In many countries, you don't have the money to actually start, to begin with, right? So I think the question of where does the money, how is it going to be funded, is a very fair question. And we need to, I'd like us to talk about that. The second issue is what you brought up, housing, for example, right? Housing is a hot issue, and it'll remain so, right? Now, some parties have talked about take the land cost out of the cost, the price. Take the land cost, because that sort of skews the outcome, skews the number, right? Now, how do we solve the housing problem? If we can talk about these two things, right? Since we talked about GRC and so on, the principles, let's now hunker down to talk about specifics. So first, I'd like to hear your views on where do we get the money from, right? One is obviously reserves, and there are restrictions on how you dip into the reserves. Number two, you can talk about generating funds, generating income specifically for something, right? But more importantly is the fundamental question that has been raised. If we put everything for the future, what's going to happen to the people who struggled in the past and who are struggling now?
Yeah,
what do we do with them, with some of us who belong to that category as well?
We are actually, at this instant, overtaxing, right? Overtaxing, that is why after giving out 2 billion plus of vouchers, we still have 4 billion as in surplus. We have no problems with that. It's an overtaxing problem, right? That's number one. Number two, I think PAP have said this, that this generation should finance this generation needs with the tax revenue, right? We should not eat towards the future generation. That's what he says. But look, when they tax us, increase the water bond tax by 30%, what did they tell us? Our our consumption of water will be increased, doubled by 2065. And we need to build the infrastructure. Then why are you taxing us to build the infrastructure for the future? It doesn't make sense. Right? This is the problem. The third thing is, because of fiscal expenditures are not controlled. Look, T5 used to be 3 billion, then it increased to 5 billion, now it's increased to 10 billion. So the fiscal discipline lies with the spending, not only on the taxation. So you want to talk about fiscal discipline, you have to talk about expenditure. Right? One MRT station, how much does it cost? It costs $500 million. And you're building a line of 30. 30 station, 40 station, how much will it cost us?
No, but what has that got to do with
Well-
not having fiscal discipline?
Well,
Can I say something? Can I say something? I have said this.
One minute, Lim Tean.
Yeah.
Let him finish.
because they build this for the future. Because at this moment, Thomson East Coast Line have very low density. They are going to lose money by virtue of maintaining this line. It's given.
Well, we don't know, we don't have all the facts, and I'm not comfortable talking about that at this point in time. No, we don't know. We can't make those assumptions.
Okay.
Huh? Okay, maybe we'll go on to
The last thing you were saying, what's the last point you were saying?
housing.
Housing. For our party, it's very simple. You want to solve the problem, you cannot crash the market. It is right. That means you cannot take off the land cost immediately for all.
Right.
Right? But the only way of doing this is to have a segregated market. What does it mean? It means we focus on the young first-timers under 30. If they want to buy to form a family unit, they do not have cash because they are just entry level. So we build a 2.5 room without the cost. It will cost less than most likely about $80,000, right? But when they want to sell, who would they sell to? Those retirees. They want to downgrade. When they sell that, they have to give back the land cost.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a very simple thing.
That's
right?
part of your manifesto,
Yes,
right?
that's part of my manifesto.
Okay, good.
So we do not crash the market.
Right.
Right.
Lim Tean.
I have said this repeatedly, and some are skeptical, but I have said this repeatedly. You can fund free education, free healthcare, without having to tax Singaporeans any extra, and without dipping into the reserves. All right. I have given you a short while ago about taking the difference in the CPF annualized returns. That amounts to about 13.4, 13.5 billion a year. Then you have the special transfers. And let me say something. The PAP is speaking out of both sides of the mouth. On one hand, it says you've got to save for future generations. But on the other hand, it says every generation has got to be responsible for its own expenses. All right? How do you square that? And I think the situation is even more acute when you realize that we have a disastrous TFR of only 0.97 currently. So despite the massive...
TFR is total fertility
rate. So despite the massive immigration over the last 20, 25 years, bringing in foreigners, it has actually not improved the TFR. The TFR keeps going down, all right? So you are now asking present generation Singaporeans to save for future generations who are not even really locally born Singaporeans. Now, you may accuse me of nativism, whatever, but I think every locally born Singaporean has the right to expect that the reserves which emanate from them should be used for their benefit. Okay? And finally, I touch on another point. And this is something that the PAP is just fixated on. It tells us that we can only use 50% of the NIRC, the net investment return contribution. The remaining 50% must be salted away. Why are you so fixated on 50%? Why can't you use 60%, which will give you an extra 5 billion? All right? And so when you combine the 13.5, you combine the 25 billion special transfers, and you combine the 5 billion, you have more than enough. You have more than enough for free education, free healthcare. That will drastically, significantly reduce the cost of living. And it will encourage young parents to have more children.
Thank you. Elvin?
So I love this debate about the different political opposition parties have about the different policy proposals that they have in terms of spending for healthcare, in terms of how to deal with public housing. As a kind of academic, I would just like to zoom out a bit more, and I would like to think a little bit more about how other countries deal with it, right? I think by zooming back more, I think we I would hope that in the next last 2 days of campaigning, right, the different opposition parties or the PAP themselves could better clearly articulate philosophically what is the ideology that they stand for, what is the vision of the country they stand for, which undergirds for them proposing these particular policies. Right? So, for the People's Action Party, you could say that for them it is they are fiscally conservative and they are doing a lot of planning and meticulous planning for to plan for the future, right? To make sure that the future burdens are well taken care of, right? Whereas for other opposition parties, maybe they could say, well, that is all right, but maybe present concerns are more important, and there needs to be a trade-off to be made, to be shifted, right? To say that, okay, we need to be more of, say, like a welfare state, right? To provide security for our current citizens, because if there's no current citizens, there's no future citizens, right? So I would, amidst all the debate, which I totally love, right? I would hope that the different opposition parties, the different political parties can maybe try to articulate in 1 or 2 or 3 sentences what their vision of future for Singapore is.
It's an excellent point, and I'm sure you'll agree. It's extremely well put as well, and that's why you're a prof. Now, I think this sort of wisdom helps us avoid a confrontational approach. You know, and I don't think personally I'm averse to that sort of an approach, zero sum. If I'm right, you have to be wrong. That approach. And so, thank you, Elvin, for saying that. Now, my question is this, right? If in this election, as it was the case in the previous elections, there's tremendous pressure on political parties, correct me if I'm wrong, to come up with specific recommendations, specific policies. If you ask me, I think it's ridiculous. This is an election campaigning period. This is not the time to sit down and look at nuts and bolts and specific. Where did you get that number from, and so on? You know, it's futile. Going back to what Elvin says, I think it's a lot more meaningful if during the hustings, the 9 days, for example, we spend a little bit more time asking about the principles. What is it that you stand for, your party? Instead of, how are you going to fund it, and so on, which is useful, but we miss the wood for the trees in the process. So thanks for the reminder, Elvin. No, but there's one more, Raj, and then back to you.
My name is Raj Mohammed, and I do some social work in the Indian Muslim community. Right, I did a quick check on free education, housing, etc. And then I checked it, which are the countries that's offering it and what are the tax rates there. Denmark tax to GDP 46.9, personal income tax 56, Sweden 42 and 52, Norway 42 and 38. And the VAT is the GST equivalent, 25% plus minus, and 24, etc. Compared to Singapore, tax to GDP 15 to 20, for the corporate tax, I believe, and personal income tax at 22%. How would you reconcile between these numbers? Because we can't be charging our corporate tax at 50% and VAT at the exorbitant 25%, the existing. If we go that way, do we have to adjust the tax rate at these levels?
If we go which way?
If we go to free education and healthcare,
so your point, if I understand it correctly, is that we do need to increase taxes if you want if you want it to be sustainable in the longer term. If you want it to be sustainable, you would need to increase taxation or income some way.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
That's the question.
Because these are the countries that are offering it already.
Yeah. We are in a situation of overtaxing. That's what surplus that's telling us. It's not I say, it's the figures that is telling us.
Okay.
Right? The surplus after you give $2 billion of vouchers. Now, why is that so? Because Norway didn't have COE. right? There's a lot of indirect taxes in Singapore, even for the business. If you ask the businesses, they are quite pissed off with all the indirect taxes. Levies, workers' levies, there's a big bulk.
But I think the question is, how do you come up with a system that is sustainable 5 years, 12 years?
May I answer that?
Yes, please.
Thank you for that question. As I have said before in my introduction, if you look at the numbers now, it does not require the government to tax the people any extra. The money is there, all right? And what the government is doing is, with these monies, it is just salting it away in the reserves. You think about it. Despite the GST hikes last year, there was a 6.4 billion surplus. So really, there was no need for a GST hike, was there? And from 1999 to 2019, the surplus was 40 billion. So this is a government that runs surpluses every single year, all right? Maybe except for the COVID period. But come back to the CPF annualized returns. That does not require extra tax. You look at the special transfers. It means that the government has this money, which is why it is transferring into endowments and trusts. The money is there. And finally, your NIRC, that is generated from the sovereign wealth funds and all that. So again, the funding is there. There's absolutely zero need to tax further. That is my argument.
Okay. In the interest of time, because there are a couple of other hands that's gone up, right? Let's just leave it at that for now. Your point is made in the sense that, those are welfare states. To put very bluntly, those are welfare states. Your point, your sentiment is, if we were to just go that way, it's a slippery slope, to use the government's term, the slippery slope, right? Lim Tean's point and so on is we have enough money. And we are generating, at the current circumstances, current levels, actually it's sustainable. That's his point. I don't think we can take this discussion any further because we don't have the details to do so. And may I suggest that we leave it at that? The point is made, right? I'd like to go to Seng Choon. You want to stand up, Seng Choon? This man, you remember him? He's the Singaporean of the Year. Give him a hand, man. Come on. He founded Dignity Kitchen. Yeah.
I lost what I want to say.
That's the whole idea. Okay, go ahead.
My name is Seng Choon. I'm the founder of Project Dignity. Actually, I read the manifesto before I came, and all the direction are focused in the same thing, helping the less disabled, the less fortunate, the disabled, a better society. And that is the right track. Now, I want to share you an alternative way. Ask not what a country can do for you and what you can do for a country. So I started a social enterprise. So what I'm trying to say, every day I give 100 boxes to the uncle, auntie who clean hawker center. I don't like 80-year-old auntie cleaning table. I got 5 bookshops for mother who give birth to disabled child. I will share you that the support in Singapore is not that great because I started Hong Kong and I got a chance to compare other countries. My question for the panel, and I think I really utmost respect for people who can stand out there and take on this task. How would you encourage people? My thing is a self-help policy. I help myself. I went to do it myself. I didn't ask. There's no grant for social enterprise. We're not private limited. We're just no charity status. So how you as a panelist trying to encourage more Singaporean to self-help? Ask not what a country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. How do you encourage more social enterprises like mine? I'm the exception. I'm the biggest in the market now, and I'm the only social enterprise and scale overseas. I have nearly 180 people work for me. 80% are disabled. So basically, maybe for the panelists, from your experience and your kind heart, how do you encourage more Singaporean? At the end of the day, Singaporean helping Singaporean. That's all. So how do you encourage?
So before that, let's give him a hand. 80% of his workers are disabled, right? Now, Seng Choon, my question to you is this.
I'm not
No, I've got to ask you the question. Who asked you to come? Okay?
I thought you're coming in for the food, that's all.
My question is this. How much of help did you get from the government?
None.
And why not?
You see, we are private limited. You're not a charity. You don't have instead of public character. So basically, you don't get your tax return. So the clever part of what I do is very simple. You create events, create projects, and then you go corporate, because now every corporate has to do CSR, ESG. So take from the rich, give it to the poor. I wish, why I don't get a lot of support, because the definition of disability. You cannot button yourself, you cannot eat, you cannot walk 3 minutes. Maybe if you guys come in, can you please change the definition? Because it's too restricted. Yeah, and that is, decades ago, they set this criteria that not many people qualify. And IQ 70, you bad luck, you're 71, you don't qualify. The guideline is very tight. And seeing a therapist is not $30, $40, it's hundreds of dollars. So the cost of having a person with disability, or now we are focusing on cancer, mental, the cost is very high. And somebody told me, Mr. Koh, you cannot open this can of benefit for disabled. ERP is free, Kapaka is free, everything is free. You can't. So if you that's the tough part.
While I think we really applaud you for what you're doing, the larger point is it doesn't need to come in the form of a grant from the government, but it could be about easing on the regulations, easing, making it easier for you to do good. That's the point I'm making. And it's a very good note to end the discussion on, in a positive note, right? So I'd like to ask, because we have to wrap now, thank you, Seng Choon. I'd like to ask this question of the panelists, right? Let's make this your 1 minute wrap, right? What is it that the government can do to make this a much better home? After hearing what Seng Choon said, it's not necessarily about fiscal policies, money, but what can we expect reasonably from the government to help us and help especially people who are trying to do good to do it better? So, David, we haven't heard from you for some time.
No, because when we do our walkabouts in Nee Soon and in constituencies that we are contesting in, we find that food security for some families is an issue. We are told anecdotal stories of neighbors knocking on doors to look for food for their children. The Lien Foundation, which is part of SMU, we did a study about 3 to 4 years ago, and they found that 20% of the respondents do not have food security. So people go hungry for a meal every day in Singapore. So that worries us, because this is a crazy rich country, right? But in a crazy rich country, we have a lot of people, they need an immediate hand up. So that's why for RDU, we are saying that we need to help people who need an immediate hand up. And we can relook the way vouchers are given. Instead of being restrictive, you can only spend it on certain things, you can only spend it in a certain manner, or it's given only to pay off, another government agency like your SMC charges, your other charges. Consolidate that, redistribute it in terms of per person, and then let them have the freedom of choice to decide. So they may buy themselves a meal. 5-10% may squander it away. Can't help it. But as what the late Toh Chin Chai said, do not let what the 5% do to penalize the rest of the 95%. Right? So I think that should be a rule that we should follow. Yeah. So for us, food security is a problem. It worries us every time we walk around and people tell us there are food security issues. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, again, our slogan is "Make Singapore Home Again." Yeah, we mentioned 2 times home. Why do we select this? Because we do not feel like this is home. Partly because the government is not doing enough to show the care it should have. For example, Manwai is not here. He was Prof Ma for one case, right?
Yeah.
Just because of the technical details are wrong. But the problem still exists due to defamation. That couple was stripped of part of a financial assistance because they crossed a certain boundaries of income. And that is heartless. And I can tell you in Singapore, over 70% of retirees get less than $500 from the CPF payout. And that is why people have food security problems. It is why people are 80 years old and they still need to work. So the fundamental issue comes with the CPF and the housing, because we have been sold a false dream in the past. You do not need to get money out from a pocket because you paid your mortgage with a CPF. But the CPF is for your retirement. So we have to solve it from the fundamental issue that to separate CPF and housing. And that is part of our things. So, and the definition of what constitutes hardship is not by your house that you stay, 5-room flat or executive. It's not. Because people are stuck with the house, they cannot sell, but they don't have cash. And that's a reality on the ground.
Got it. Thank you. Lim Tean.
I would like, I mean, if I was in a position of power and I could decide, I would certainly want to do a lot more so that Singaporeans can regain a sense of dignity. And that was my slogan for People's Voice, regaining our dignity, our country, our future. I am not a socialist, but I think in these difficult times, and I do blame it on globalization, because globalization has created an inequality gap which is unconscionable. And many Singaporeans have fallen through the cracks, but the government refuses to acknowledge that. And certainly, I would be very sympathetic to organizations such as those run by Seng Choon. I would want the social welfare of this country, to grant them a lot more financial assistance so that they can, develop the projects they want to do. And I don't mind if we are more socialist in this aspect, because I think our people deserve it. That's my answer.
Thank you, Lim Tean. Elvin.
So my answer is going to be based on a hypothetical, and the hypothetical is, come Saturday evening, we are going to have a PAP government, right? And
how did you know that?
Hypothetically, if come Saturday evening, we do indeed have a PAP government. I hope that in the next 5 years, they will live up to one of the promises. And one of the promises is to want to be inclusive and to listen to everyone for their different ideas. I think Prime Minister Lawrence Wong said that he's very open to hearing from different ideas. And one way to be inclusive of different ideas is for the PAP government, the civil service maybe, to actually not just dismiss the different ideas that have come up in the various manifestos from the different opposition parties, but to have a serious look at the different ideas proposed by the different manifestos of different opposition parties. And if possible, don't be shy to adopt one or two of them. Because I think ultimately what everyone wants, including the PAP, including the opposition parties, is to do better for Singaporeans. And I think that is what this whole democratic exercise every 5 years is what we want to achieve, to do better for Singaporeans.
Thank you. As a moderator, I guess I have the last word. Number one, respect. I think this country can do a lot more with respecting people. You can talk till the cows come home about diversity, you can have slogans, you can have all those things, but if you don't have basic respect for another person who happens to have a different point of view, it's a lost case. So I would strongly urge that we use occasions like the election as opportunities for us to demonstrate that we have not lost this important human quality of respecting another individual, respecting another group. And we can do a lot better in getting rid of an adversarial stance. Nobody wins in an adversarial stance. So, on that note, I'd like to say a very big thank you to the panelists for being here, even though they're better off actually being there. But we really, really appreciate you coming here, and to the audience for making time to be here. And to my team and friends at Podster who are helping to organize this, a big thank you. And let's vote from the heart, not wisely, from the heart on Saturday. Good evening.